The massive space station hung in the void like a metal flower with thousands of petals. Each petal was a docking bay for ships from across the galaxy. Inside the central hub, the Great Council chamber buzzed with activity. Hundreds of different alien species filled the curved seats that rose up like an amphitheater. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales that changed color with their moods. A few breathed different gases and sat in special enclosed boxes. At one of the lower tables sat 3 humans. Kang Wu adjusted his dark blue diplomatic uniform and tried to keep his face calm. He had been Earth's main ambassador for 3 years now. Next to him sat Li Hana in her crisp military dress uniform. She was there to speak about defense matters. Park Tae sat on his other side wearing a simple business suit. He handled trade agreements between Earth and other worlds. The current speaker was a Thralian. These aliens looked like giant praying mantises, but with 6 arms instead of 4. This particular Thralian waved all 6 arms as he spoke into the translation device. His words came out in dozens of languages at once through speakers around the chamber. "The human proposal is ridiculous," the Thralian said, with a clicking sound that meant annoyance. "They want us to stop taking resources from planets that cannot even travel between stars yet. This shows how little humans understand about galactic economics. We have been doing this for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire." Many aliens in the chamber made sounds that the translators identified as agreement or laughter. Kang Wu felt his jaw muscles tighten. This was the 15th time in 3 years that human ideas had been dismissed this way. Every time humans suggested something that might help weaker species or prevent wars, the older galactic powers called them naive or stupid. A Zalathi delegate stood up next. The Zalathi looked like walking tree branches with glowing sap running through them instead of blood. This one's sap was pulsing red with anger. "Humans are still too emotional to make good decisions," the Zalathi said in a voice like wind through leaves. "They let their feelings guide them instead of logic. Perhaps in another 1,000 years they will be ready to participate in serious galactic affairs." Li Hana's hand moved to where her weapon would be if she were allowed to carry one in the chamber. Kang Wu put his hand on her arm to stop her, but inside, his own anger was growing like a fire being fed more wood. The worst part was that human ideas actually worked. 3 months ago, Kang Wu had suggested a new way to stop pirate attacks on trade routes. The aliens had called it too creative and unrealistic. Then the human fleet had used those same tactics to destroy an entire pirate armada without losing a single ship. The aliens had quietly started copying the human methods, but never admitted humans were right. 2 weeks earlier, Park Tae had proposed a trade agreement that would have prevented a war between 2 mining colonies. The galactic powers had voted it down, saying humans did not understand real politics. The war had started anyway, and was now costing millions of lives and disrupting trade across 7 star systems. But the thing that made Kang Wu most angry was how the aliens treated human scientific discoveries. Dr. Yoon Min had shared the secrets of human fusion technology freely with all council members. This technology was helping power hundreds of alien worlds and making their lives better. But when Yoon Min had asked for research help on a new medical project, the aliens had said humans needed to earn their place before getting such assistance. The current debate was about the Devourer threat. These mysterious creatures came from the dark space between galaxies and destroyed everything in their path. They had already consumed 17 star systems. The human military had developed new tactics that actually worked against them. But the alien commanders said these tactics were too chaotic and unprofessional to use in serious warfare. A massive creature that looked like a living rock formation stood up to speak. This was the representative from the granite worlds. "Humans," it said in a voice like grinding stone, "should focus on learning from their superiors instead of constantly suggesting changes to systems that have worked for millions of years. Their youth as a space-faring species shows in their inability to accept established order." That was when something inside Kang Wu finally broke. He had spent 3 years being polite while aliens insulted his species. He had smiled and nodded. While they dismissed ideas that could save lives, he had watched them take credit for human innovations while calling humans too primitive to understand galactic society. Kang Wu stood up slowly. The chamber was so large that his human voice would not carry far without the amplification system. He walked to the central speaking platform where a microphone waited. Every alien eye, sensor, or optical organ in the chamber turned toward him. "We quit," Kang Wu said simply. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the constant humming of the life support systems seemed to quiet down. The translation devices repeated his words in hundreds of languages, but the meaning was clear in any tongue. "Humans withdraw from all council proceedings," Kang Wu continued. "We withdraw from all joint military operations. We withdraw from all trade agreements. We withdraw from all scientific cooperation, effective immediately." Li Hana was already standing and gathering her military briefings. Park Tae closed his tablet and put his trade documents into his case. Other human staff members throughout the chamber began moving toward the exits. The Thralian who had started this whole debate began clicking rapidly in panic. "You cannot simply leave," he said. "There are procedures. There are treaties." "The treaties," Park Tae said as he walked past the Thralian's table, "required mutual respect. You have made it clear that respect does not exist." A Zalathi delegate tried to block their path. "This is emotional decision-making," the tree-like alien said. "This proves our point about human immaturity." Li Hana stopped in front of the alien. Even though the Zalathi was twice her height, there was something in her posture that made the alien step backward. "You want to see emotional?" she asked quietly. "Emotional would be us using our chaotic military tactics on council members, instead of just leaving peacefully." The chamber erupted in noise as aliens began arguing with each other about what this meant. Some were laughing, saying humans would be back within days, begging for readmission. Others looked worried about ongoing military operations against the Devourers. Kang Wu reached the main exit and turned back for one last look at the Great Council chamber. "When you decide you actually want partners instead of servants," he said into his communicator, so the translation system would carry his words throughout the chamber, "you know where to find us." The three humans walked through the curved corridors toward their docking bay. Other species they passed seemed confused about what had just happened. Some whispered among themselves. Others stared openly at the departing humans. At the docking bay, their ship waited. It was a sleek human design that could outrun most alien vessels and had defensive systems that even the advanced species envied. The crew was already preparing for departure. As they boarded, Park Tae asked, "What do you think will happen now?" Kang Wu looked back at the massive space station that had been humanity's gateway to galactic civilization. "Now they get to see how well their perfect systems work without us." The human ship undocked and turned toward empty space. Within minutes, it had jumped to faster-than-light travel and vanished. Behind them, the Great Council chamber was still in chaos as alien delegates tried to figure out what to do next. None of them realized yet that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 3 months had passed since the humans walked out of the Great Council chamber. Kim So sat in the intelligence monitoring station buried deep inside Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Banks of screens surrounded her, each one showing different streams of galactic communications. Her job was to watch and listen to what the alien species were saying and doing, now that humanity was no longer part of their councils. The first month had been exactly what the aliens expected. They celebrated humanity's departure like children, celebrating when strict parents leave the house. The Thralian news networks ran stories about how galactic civilization could finally progress without human interference. The Zalathi government issued statements about returning to logical decision-making processes. Even the smaller alien species seemed relieved that they no longer had to pretend to respect the primitive newcomers. But Kim So was trained to look deeper than surface celebrations. She noticed small things that others might miss. Trade route efficiency reports showed tiny delays starting to appear. Military coordination between different alien fleets was taking longer to organize. Scientific research projects that had included human participants were slowing down or stopping completely. By the second month, those tiny problems had grown into visible cracks. Kim So watched a heated debate in the Zalathi parliament where representatives argued about a trade dispute with the Granite Worlds. Before humans left, Park Tae would have mediated such disagreements in a few days. Now, the two species had been arguing for 6 weeks with no solution in sight. The military situation was worse. The Devourers had attacked another star system, and the alien response had been a disaster. Without human tactical advice, the alien fleets had used their traditional formation fighting. The Devourers had adapted to these predictable patterns within hours and destroyed most of the defending ships. 2 billion creatures had died when the Devourers consumed the planets in that system. Kim So pulled up the after-action reports that alien intelligence services thought were secret. The Thralian fleet commander had written, "Enemy adaptation rate exceeded all previous parameters. Recommend immediate revision of engagement protocols." What he really meant was that they needed the human chaos tactics that they had previously called unprofessional. The economic problems were spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Humans had been involved in 60% of all galactic trade agreements, not as the main partners, but as mediators and arbitrators. When trade disputes arose, other species trusted human judgment because humans had no ancient feuds or territorial claims that might bias their decisions. Without human arbitration, old conflicts were resurging. The Zalothian Thralians had started what they called a minor border disagreement over mining rights in an asteroid field. Both species claimed the same region based on ancient treaties, written in languages that no longer existed. Before humans left, such disputes were settled through human-mediated negotiations. Now both sides were moving military ships toward the disputed zone. Kim So received a priority message from Yoon Min, the scientist who had been working on joint research projects with alien species. The message was short. All alien research. Partners have stopped responding to communications. Projects involving human technology are being continued without us, but they are making critical errors. The fusion biohybrid systems are failing on 17 worlds because they do not understand the human modifications. This was exactly what Choi Jin had predicted. As Earth's defense coordinator, Choi Jin had designed the silent protocol that humanity was now following. All human colonies had stopped responding to alien communications. Human ships avoided alien space entirely. When alien vessels tried to contact human ships in neutral space, the humans would simply jump away without answering. The silent protocol was working better than anyone had hoped. Humans had not realized how much the galaxy depended on them until they were gone. It was like removing a keystone from an arch. The whole structure started to collapse without that crucial piece. Choi Jin's daily reports from Earth showed that human worlds were actually thriving during the isolation. Without the constant demands of galactic politics, human scientists could focus on their own projects. Human traders were developing new routes between human colonies that bypassed alien space entirely. The human military was using the time to perfect their anti-devourer tactics without interference from alien commanders who thought they knew better. But the aliens were not thriving. Kim So watched their news feeds and government communications with growing amazement. The granite worlds were experiencing food shortages because their agricultural systems had been designed with human biotechnology that they did not fully understand. The crystalline hegemony was facing revolts on 3 worlds because their economy had become dependent on human-mediated trade routes that no longer existed. The most serious problem was the devourer threat. These creatures from dark space seemed to sense when their enemies were disorganized. They had launched attacks on 5 different fronts simultaneously, something they had never done before. The alien response was chaotic and ineffective. Kim So pulled up the classified military communications she had intercepted. The Thralian Supreme Fleet Commander was requesting emergency assistance from any available forces. The Zalothi War Council was debating whether to abandon 2 entire star systems because they could not coordinate an effective defense. The Granite Worlds had lost contact with an entire exploration fleet that had encountered devourers near the galactic rim. The problem was not that alien technology was inferior to human technology. In many ways, alien ships and weapons were more advanced than human equivalents. The problem was that humans fought differently. Where aliens used rigid formations and predictable tactics, humans improvised and adapted constantly. The Devourers, hive minds, could analyze and counter standard military doctrine within hours, but human creativity and chaos confused them. Song Ray, the former human fleet commander who had developed the famous Chaos Doctrine, was now on Mars training human. pilots in advanced versions of these tactics. Her report showed that human anti-devourer effectiveness had actually improved during the isolation period. Without alien commanders insisting on proper formation flying and coordinated battle plans, human ships could use their full creative potential. Kim so received another interesting intercept from alien space. It was a recording of a private conversation between two Zalathi ministers. They were discussing the economic crisis, and one said, "Perhaps we were too hasty in our judgment of human capabilities." The other replied, "Their emotional decision-making may have been more logical than we realized." But the most telling sign was in the civilian communications. Kim So monitored public forums and news discussions across dozens of alien worlds. The tone had shifted dramatically. Where 3 months ago aliens had celebrated human departure, now there were growing calls for the Council to reconsider the human situation. Some aliens were more direct. A Thralian journalist had written an article titled, "Did We Make a Mistake?" that was being widely read across the galaxy. A Zalathi philosopher had published a paper arguing that human emotional intelligence might actually be a form of advanced logical processing that aliens did not understand. The most surprising development was happening on worlds that had never had much contact with humans. These populations were learning about human achievements for the first time now that they were gone. They discovered that humans had shared advanced technologies freely, had prevented dozens of wars through skilled diplomacy, and had developed the only effective tactics against the devourer threat. Kim so compiled her monthly report for Earth's leadership. The summary was simple. Galactic civilization was beginning to collapse without human participation. Trade networks were failing, military coordination was breaking down, and the devourer threat was growing worse every day. But she also noted something else in her report. The aliens were starting to realize their mistake. Public opinion was shifting toward wanting humans back. Some government officials were making private inquiries about how to contact human leadership. The question was whether the aliens would swallow their pride in time to ask for help, or whether their arrogance would let the galaxy burn rather than admit they had been wrong about the primitive humans. On Earth, President Bai Wan was reading similar reports from intelligence officers throughout human space. The humans had proven their point. Now they had to decide what to do with their victory. Some humans wanted to stay isolated and let the aliens suffer the consequences of their disrespect. Others argued that innocent beings were dying while the galactic powers learned their lesson. The choice would be humanity's to make, but first they would wait to see if any aliens were humble enough to ask for help. Nam Yeon floated in the zero-gravity laboratory aboard Titan Station, watching alien news feeds on multiple screens while her experiments ran automatically in the background. As a xenobiologist, she had spent years studying alien life forms and building relationships with researchers across the galaxy. Now she was monitoring how those same aliens were handling the growing crisis without human assistance. The news was worse than anyone had predicted. 6 months had passed since humans walked out of the Great Council, and galactic civilization was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater. What had started as minor inconveniences had cascaded into major disasters, and those disasters were now threatening the survival of entire species. The Zalathi-Thralian border conflict had exploded into full-scale war 3 weeks ago. Both sides had moved massive fleets to the disputed asteroid field, and neither was willing to back down. Without human mediators, their ancient hatred had surfaced like poison rising from deep water. The Zalathi accused the Thralians of being resource-hungry insects, while the Thralians called the Zalathi arrogant plant things who think they own the galaxy. Nam Yeon watched footage of the latest battle and felt sick to her stomach. Hundreds of ships destroying each other over mining rights to rocks that contained materials both species could easily obtain elsewhere. But pride and old grudges had made compromise impossible. The war was disrupting trade across 17 star systems and had already cost more lives than the disputed resources were worth. The granite worlds were facing a different kind of disaster. Their agricultural systems had been gradually modified, with human biotechnology over the past 3 years. These modifications had increased crop yields by 40% and made the plants resistant to common diseases. But the aliens had never fully understood how the human modifications worked. When the plants started showing signs of genetic instability, the granite worlds had no idea how to fix the problem. Nam Yeon had helped design those modifications. She knew exactly what was happening and how to solve it, but she was under strict orders from Earth not to contact any alien governments. The silent protocol was still in effect, and breaking it could undermine everything humans were trying to achieve. She watched Granite World news reports showing vast agricultural regions turning brown and dying. The massive rock-like beings who lived on those worlds were facing famine for the first time in their recorded history. Their government was desperately trying to contact human scientists, but all messages were going unanswered. The crystalline hegemony was experiencing similar problems with industrial systems that incorporated human technology. Their crystal-based computers had been enhanced with human neural network designs that made them incredibly efficient. But when the systems started malfunctioning, the crystalline engineers discovered they had never really understood the human innovations they had copied. Entire manufacturing centers were shutting down. The crystalline economy, which depended on precision manufacturing and export of high-tech devices, was collapsing. Unemployment was rising, and some crystalline citizens were beginning to revolt against their government for driving away the humans who could fix everything. But the worst crisis was the Devourer attacks. These dark space entities had somehow sensed that galactic defenses were weakened, and they were pressing their advantage ruthlessly. In the past month alone, they had consumed 4 more star systems, and were advancing on multiple fronts. Nam Yeon pulled up classified military communications that human intelligence was intercepting. The aliens' attempts to coordinate defense were failing spectacularly. The Thralian fleet admiral was insisting on using traditional swarm tactics that involved surrounding enemies with superior numbers. The Zalathi War Council preferred precision, strikes with small groups of advanced ships. The Granite Worlds wanted to build massive defensive fortifications and make the Devourers come to them. Each approach might work against normal enemies, but the Devourers were not normal. They were some kind of hive mind entity that could analyze and adapt to any predictable strategy within hours. The alien approaches were all predictable because they followed ancient military doctrines that every species had used for thousands of years. Only human tactics had proven effective against the Devourers, and those tactics were based on unpredictability and chaos. Human commanders like Song Ray had developed strategies that changed constantly during battle, used deliberately confusing formations, and sometimes did things that seemed to make no tactical sense until the larger pattern became clear. The aliens had dismissed these tactics as unprofessional and chaotic, but they worked because they confused the Devourer hive minds. When the enemy could not predict what you would do next, their adaptation advantage became useless. Nam Yeon watched security footage from the latest Devourer attack on the Helix Nebula colonies. The alien defense fleet had used perfect textbook formations and followed standard battle protocols exactly. The Devourers had analyzed their patterns within 2 hours and then systematically destroyed every ship using counters to each predictable tactic. The death toll was enormous. 3 billion beings had died when the Devourers consumed the Helix colonies, and the survivors were fleeing toward the galactic core in desperate refugee fleets. Many of these refugees were now demanding that their governments bring back the humans, because everyone knew human tactics could have saved those worlds. Dan was monitoring similar intelligence from the Lunar Observation Post. His job was tracking alien government communications and public opinion surveys. His latest report showed that civilian support for human return was growing rapidly across the galaxy. On Thralian worlds, 67% of the population now favored immediate reconciliation with humanity. On Zalathi planets, the number was even higher at 74%. Even among the proud Granite Worlds, 58% of citizens wanted their government to apologize to humans and request their assistance. But the governments themselves were still too proud to admit they had made a mistake. The same leaders who had called humans too emotional and too primitive were now faced with the choice between swallowing their pride or watching their civilizations collapse. Nam Yeon intercepted a private communication between the Thralian Supreme Chancellor and his closest advisors. The Chancellor was asking, "How can we contact the humans without appearing weak?" His military advisor replied, "Perhaps we could frame it as offering them a second chance to prove themselves worthy of council membership." The arrogance was stunning. Even facing multiple crises that were clearly caused by human absence, the aliens still wanted to pretend they were doing humans a favor by allowing them back. The Zalathi were having similar discussions. Nam Yeon had recorded a conversation between two Zalathi ministers where one said, "The humans may have been more capable than we initially assessed." The other replied, "Yes, but we cannot admit error. Perhaps we could suggest that human isolation has allowed them to mature enough for true galactic citizenship." Meanwhile, human worlds were thriving in isolation. Nam Yeon's reports from Earth showed that human science was advancing rapidly without the constant interference of alien experts who thought they knew better. Human trade networks between human colonies were more efficient than the old galactic routes had ever been. Human military forces were becoming incredibly effective at fighting devourers using pure human tactics without alien improvements. Some humans were arguing that they should stay isolated permanently. Why return to a galaxy that had treated them with such disrespect? Why help species that had called them primitive and emotional? Let the aliens solve their own problems. But others argued that innocent people were dying while proud governments refused to ask for help. The devourers were consuming entire worlds full of beings who had never insulted humanity. The agricultural crisis on Granite Worlds was causing famine among civilians who had no role in government decisions. Nam Yeon found herself torn between these positions. As a scientist, she hated watching alien ecosystems collapse from problems she could easily solve. As a human being, she was angry at the disrespect her species had endured and wanted the aliens to learn their lesson completely. The decision would ultimately be made by Earth's government, but Nam Yeon knew that the alien governments would have to make the first move. Humans had already proven their point by leaving. Now the aliens needed to prove they had learned from their mistakes. The question was whether alien pride would bend before galactic civilization broke entirely. Every day brought new disasters, and every day the aliens came closer to a choice between their dignity and their survival. Nam Yeon looked at the latest casualty reports from devourer attacks and made her own choice. She began preparing a detailed analysis of what the aliens would need to do to convince humanity to return. If and when they finally asked for help, humans should be ready with clear conditions that would prevent this situation from happening again. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the value of the species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. Lim Jun was reading routine intelligence reports in his office on Luna Station when the priority alert flashed across all his screens. As Earth's Director of Galactic Affairs, he handled what little diplomatic contact humanity still maintained with alien governments. For 8 months, that contact had been exactly zero. Now something had changed. The message came through the old emergency diplomatic channel that had been established for genuine galactic crises. No alien government had used it since the humans left. The transmission was marked with the highest priority codes and carried the official seals of every major species in the Galactic Council. Lim Jun opened the message and read it twice to make sure he understood what he was seeing. It was a formal request for immediate diplomatic contact to discuss terms for human reintegration into galactic civilization. The message was signed by the Supreme Chancellor of the Thralians, the Prime Minister of the Zalathi, the High Commander of the Granite Worlds, and representatives from 47 other species. But it was not just a request. It was a plea that came very close to begging. The message admitted that human participation has proven more valuable than initially assessed, and that galactic stability requires human involvement in council proceedings. The aliens were asking humanity to return to save them from disasters they could not handle alone. Lim Jun immediately contacted President Bae Wan on Earth. Within an hour, humanity's top leaders were gathered in the secure conference room beneath the presidential palace in Seoul. The debate that followed would determine not just humanity's future, but the future of the entire galaxy. Bae Wan read the alien message aloud to the assembled group. Foreign Minister Han Sol listened with a grim expression. Defense Minister Ko Min took notes on a tablet. Intelligence Director Moon Hai had brought detailed reports on the current state of alien civilizations. "They are desperate," Moon Hai reported. "The Zalathi-Thralian War has spread to 6 more star systems. The Granite World's agricultural crisis is causing mass starvation. The crystalline hegemony's economy has collapsed completely, and the Devourers have consumed 11 more star systems. In the past month alone, Han Sol was the first to speak. Why should we help them? They called us primitive. They dismissed our ideas. They treated us like children who needed to earn our place at the adult table. Let them solve their own problems. Ko Min disagreed. People are dying while their governments learn humility. The Devourers don't care about alien politics. They just consume everything in their path. If we wait too long, there might not be a galaxy left to save. The debate continued for hours. Some argued for permanent isolation. Humanity had proven they could thrive without the galaxy, so why return to a system that had disrespected them? Others pointed out that the refugee crisis was growing worse every day, and innocent civilians were paying the price for their leaders' arrogance. Beiwan listened to all sides before making his decision. "We will hold a referendum," he announced. "Every human world will vote on whether to return to galactic civilization. But first, we need to establish what our conditions would be if we do return." The conditions they developed were comprehensive. Humans would return to the Council with full membership and equal voting rights. The human military doctrine would be officially adopted for all anti-devourer operations. Human mediation would be required for any disputes between Council members. And most importantly, no Council member could dismiss human proposals without providing detailed logical reasoning. While Earth debated, the alien situation continued to deteriorate. Jiang Wu, the new human ambassador designate, was monitoring the crisis from his preparation facility on Mars. His job was to be ready if humanity decided to return to galactic politics. The latest reports were catastrophic. The Zalathi-Thralian war had triggered a cascade of old conflicts throughout the galaxy. Species that had maintained peace for centuries were now fighting over ancient grievances that human diplomacy had previously helped them resolve. Trade networks were collapsing as different factions tried to cut off their enemies' supply lines. The Devourer threat was even worse. These entities had launched coordinated attacks on 7 different sectors simultaneously. Without human tactical innovation, the alien defense fleets were being systematically destroyed. The Devourers seemed to have learned that galactic military doctrine was predictable and were exploiting that knowledge ruthlessly. Jiang Wu received intelligence reports, showing that some alien governments were secretly trying to copy human tactics without understanding the principles behind them. The results were disasters. Alien commanders who tried to use chaotic formations without understanding human strategic thinking just created actual chaos that the Devourers exploited easily. The most telling report came from a captured Devourer communication node. Human cryptographers had broken the alien code months ago, but had kept that secret. The Devourers were discussing human tactics and expressing something that their translators identified as concern or wariness. The hive minds knew that human unpredictability was the one thing they could not easily counter. Meanwhile, civilian unrest was spreading across alien worlds. On Thralian planets, protesters demanded that their government bring back the humans immediately. On Zalathi worlds, citizens were holding mass demonstrations calling for humble negotiation with humanity. Even the normally stoic granite worlds were experiencing their first civilian protests in recorded history. The protests were not just about the military crisis. Ordinary aliens had realized how much their daily lives had depended on human innovations. Medical treatments developed with human biotechnology were no longer being updated, causing healthcare crises. Transportation systems that used human engineering were breaking down without proper maintenance. Communication networks enhanced with human technology were becoming unreliable. More importantly, many aliens were discovering that they actually missed human perspectives in their society. Human art and entertainment had become popular throughout the galaxy because it offered emotional depth that most alien cultures lacked. Human restaurants in major alien cities had become gathering places where different species could meet on neutral ground. Human teachers had been invited to alien schools because their emotional intelligence helped students from different species understand each other. All of that was gone now, and its absence left a void that many aliens had not expected to feel. The breaking point came when the Devourers launched their largest attack yet. A massive fleet emerged from dark space and headed directly toward the galactic core, where the most populated worlds were located. If this attack succeeded, billions of beings would die. The alien response was immediate and massive. Every species contributed ships to the largest fleet in galactic history. But within 12 hours, it became clear that size alone would not be enough. The Devourers adapted to every tactic the aliens tried, and the massive fleet was being systematically destroyed. That was when the second message arrived at Luna Station. This one was not signed by governments. It was signed by the military commanders who were actually fighting the Devourers. The message was simple and direct. We need human tactical assistance immediately. Our current approach is failing. Please, help us save our worlds. Bei Wan called an emergency session of the human leadership. The referendum had not been completed yet, but events were moving faster than the political process. A decision had to be made within hours, not days. Ko Min presented the military situation. The alien fleet will be completely destroyed within 48 hours unless something changes. After that, the Devourers will have a clear path to the core worlds. We are talking about a potential death toll in the trillions. Han Sol remained, opposed to immediate intervention. This could be a trap to get us back under unfavorable conditions. We should stick to our original plan and wait for the referendum results. But Moon High had intercepted communications from the battlefront that changed the debate. The alien fleet commanders are sharing everything, she reported. They are sending us their complete tactical databases, their ship specifications, their command codes. They are giving us access to their most sensitive military secrets because they trust us to help them. That level of trust was something the aliens had never shown before. For the first time, they were treating humans as true partners rather than junior allies. Bei Wan made the decision that would reshape galactic history. We return, he said simply. Not because they asked, but because people are dying and we can save them. But we return on our terms, with full equality and respect. The orders went out immediately. Human fleets throughout the galaxy received emergency deployment instructions. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they were finally treated as equals rather than primitives. Jiang Wu stepped off the human transport ship and walked through the docking tube into the Great Council Chamber Station. 8 months ago, he had watched Kang Wu and the human delegation leave this place in anger and frustration. Now he was returning as humanity's new chief ambassador, but everything had changed. The reception was completely different this time. Instead of being directed to a lower-level table in the back of the chamber, Jiang Wu was escorted to the central platform, where the council's most important members sat. Alien representatives who had previously ignored human delegations now stood and bowed as he passed. The Thralian Supreme Chancellor personally greeted him at the platform entrance. Ambassador Jiang Wu, the Thralian said, his 6 arms moving. In what human diplomats had learned was a gesture of deep respect. The Council is grateful beyond measure for humanity's return in our hour of greatest need. Jiang Wu nodded politely, but did not smile. The humans were back. But they were not back as supplicants. They were returning as equals who had proven their worth through absence rather than presence. The emergency session was already in progress when Jiang Wu took his seat. Moon High, the new Supreme Commander of Human Forces, was presenting the tactical situation to the assembled alien leaders. Large screens showed the current battle against the Devourers, and the news was grim. The enemy fleet is adapting to all conventional tactics, Moon High explained. Every formation you try, every strategy you implement, they counter within hours. Your current approach will result in complete defeat within 36 hours. A Zalathi admiral whose sap was pulsing with desperate energy spoke up. Commander Moon High, we have studied the human tactics that were successful against the Devourers previously. Our attempts to implement them have failed. We require your direct guidance. This was a remarkable admission. 8 months ago, these same aliens had called human tactics unprofessional and chaotic. Now they were admitting that they could not understand or copy human methods without human help. Moon High activated a new display showing human tactical principles. The key is not specific formations or predetermined strategies. The key is constant adaptation and deliberate unpredictability. Your minds think in patterns that can be analyzed and countered. Human tactics work because we embrace controlled chaos. She began issuing orders that sounded contradictory to alien thinking. Human ships would break formation randomly during battle. Commanders would make decisions based on intuition rather than calculated probabilities. Battle plans would change, completely in the middle of engagements for no logical reason except to confuse the enemy. Within 6 hours, the effect was dramatic. The Devourer advance slowed as their hive minds struggled to analyze human tactical patterns that had no consistent pattern. Human ships danced through the battle space in ways that seemed random, but were actually guided by a deeper understanding of chaos theory and psychological warfare. But the real change was not just in military tactics. SEO Ho, the new human director of economic affairs, was already working with alien trade representatives to rebuild the galactic economy. The approach was revolutionary. Instead of trying to maximize short-term profits for individual species, the new economic framework focused on long-term stability and mutual benefit. We are implementing what we call empathy economics, Seo Ho explained to a gathering of alien trade ministers. Instead of competing against each other, we design systems where everyone benefits when everyone else benefits. This creates positive feedback loops rather than destructive competition. The aliens listened with fascination to concepts that seemed obvious to humans, but revolutionary to species that had been competing for resources for millions of years. The idea that cooperation could be more profitable than competition was transforming how they thought about galactic commerce. An Li was establishing the new diplomatic protocols that would prevent the kind of disrespect that had driven humans away in the first place. The emotional intelligence protocols required all council members to consider the psychological and social impact of their decisions, not just the logical outcomes. Many galactic problems arise from misunderstanding between species with different emotional frameworks, An Li explained. Humans specialize in reading emotional subtexts and identifying underlying concerns that others might miss. This ability is not primitive. It is an advanced form of intelligence that complements logical analysis. The protocols required alien diplomats to work with human advisors who could help them understand how their words and actions affected other species. It was a humbling requirement for proud alien civilizations, but they accepted it because they had seen what happened when emotional intelligence was absent from galactic affairs. The most dramatic change was in the scientific collaboration. Du Yeon, Earth's new director of research cooperation, was coordinating with alien scientists to solve the crises that had emerged during human isolation. But instead of just sharing human solutions, the new approach focused on teaching aliens how to think creatively about problems. We are not just giving you our technologies, Du Yan explained to a group of Granite World engineers. We are teaching you the thinking processes that led to those technologies. This way, you can develop your own innovations instead of just copying ours. The agricultural crisis on Granite Worlds was solved within days once human biotechnologists arrived to fix the genetic modifications. But more importantly, Granite World scientists learned the principles behind human bioengineering so they could make their own improvements in the future. The crystalline hegemony's industrial problems were solved through a similar approach. Human engineers did not just repair the malfunctioning systems. They taught crystalline technicians how to understand and modify the neural network designs that had been causing problems. But the greatest transformation was cultural. Human art, music, and literature began flowing back into alien societies. But now it was welcomed and celebrated rather than merely tolerated. Alien artists began collaborating with human creators, producing works that combined logical precision with emotional depth in ways that neither species could achieve alone. The war between the Zelathi and Thralians ended within a week of human return. Human mediators did not just negotiate a ceasefire, they helped both species understand the underlying fears and pride issues that had caused the conflict. The solution involved creating a joint mining operation where both species worked together and shared the profits equally. Most importantly, the Devourer threat was being contained for the first time since the attacks began. Human tactical doctrine was not just more effective, it was teaching alien commanders to think differently about warfare in general. Some alien officers were developing their own variations of human chaos tactics, creating hybrid approaches that combined alien technological superiority with human creative thinking. The change in alien attitudes toward humanity was profound. Species that had previously seen humans as primitive newcomers now recognized them as essential partners. Human colonies that had been isolated for 8 months were suddenly receiving requests for cultural and scientific exchanges from dozens of alien civilizations. But perhaps the most significant change was in how decisions were made in the Great Council. Previously, alien species had voted based on narrow self-interest or ancient alliances. Now they consulted with human advisors to understand the broader implications of their choices. The emotional intelligence that aliens had once mocked was now seen as crucial for preventing conflicts before they started. Jiang Wu stood before the Great Council at the end of the emergency session and delivered humanity's first formal address since returning. "We did not come back because you asked us to," he said. "We came back because people were dying and we could help them. But we return as equals, not as supplicants." He paused and looked around the chamber at alien faces that now showed respect instead of condescension. "You wanted us to be more like you, logical, predictable, focused on narrow self-interest. Instead, we have made you more like us, creative, empathetic, focused on mutual benefit. This galaxy is now stronger because it combines alien logic with human wisdom." The applause that followed was genuine and sustained. For the first time in galactic history, every species in the chamber was united in recognizing the value of diversity and the danger of dismissing others as inferior. The Devourers still threatened from dark space, and new challenges would emerge as they always did. But now the galaxy faced these threats with humanity's unlimited creativity, unshakable moral compass, and the hard-earned knowledge that some species are too valuable to dismiss and too dangerous to lose. As Jiang Wu later reported to Earth, humanity had not just returned to the Council. They had transformed it into something better than it had ever been before. The galaxy that had rejected human values now embraced them as necessary for survival. The species that had demanded humans grow up had learned that sometimes the youngest voice in the room offers the wisdom that everyone else needs to hear.